Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Anita Talks History and Genealogy. Whew, what a day, what a day, what a day. Well, it looked like the circus done left town and headed to Mar-a-Lago. I'm just saying. You all's President DJT, he's on the road again. And it's such a mess. But when the chickens come home to roost, it's always going to be a mess. And today is Friday, 16th of January. It is a beautiful sunny day here in California. There's a lot going on here within our country. Just saying, we're all aware of it, those of us who are paying attention. ICE is out there harassing people all over the country. Well, not all over the country, mostly in blue states, because our so-called Trump, he got an issue with the blue states. And we got ICE, and then we got the Border Patrol, who is patrolling everything but the border. So that's a mess. So this is going to be history one day. One day we're going to look back on this and realize that, wow, back in those days, like I look back and I'm in the 60s and I'm like, ooh, back in those days, yeah, there was some crazy going on. So we got some crazy going on here. A president that's deranged. He's about to throw Marco Rubio and Naomi, whoever that woman is, under the bus, and anybody else that he can throw under the bus to slow it down so they won't come for him. That's DJT. And so I'm welcome to Anita Talks History and Genealogy. And today, we're just kind of reminiscing, and because I see a lot online when we're talking about history and genealogy, I see people coming on, and some people come on and they want to know more about genealogy and how to trace their roots, how to find their ancestors. And then there's other people that come on and talk about, how to do DNA and how reliable is DNA, and just have a lot of questions. And the reason that I have Anita Talks Genealogy is to answer a lot of those questions to the best of my ability. And when I started, which was many, many years ago, I was, one of the few persons that looked like me that was out there in those libraries looking for answers to who my ancestors were. At the time that I was doing it, there was no Windows. Back then, the computers, like we would get a laptop or a regular computer, the desktop computer, and you would have to set your own Windows up. So I would, if I got a new computer, I would have to go in and set my own Windows up. And I learned how to do that because back in the 70s, the late 70s, we lived in Silicon Valley, and they were teaching us how to do coding. We took classes on how to do coding, how to build frames. And that was before, Windows. And when Windows came, I was so happy. It's every time I turn my laptop on and there's Windows, I just praise God. Because that building your own, your own frame, your own window, whew, that would take all day. And that's something that, it was time consuming to do that kind of stuff. And people that were doing it in Silicon Valley was making good money, you know. But for me, it was just like setting up the windows made it easier for me to go in there to save, my information and, you know, and to move around within that computer. So that, some of y'all wasn't even born when all that was going on. But, so once this happened and I was able to set up we were able to get on, went from typewriters to word processors, then to the desktop computers, now to the laptops, and things just got better and better as time went on. And so now, I didn't even know about DNA. I think the first DNA test I took was in 2003 or something like that. Anyway, so I was, most of the information I was getting, I had to either write a letter and wait for a response, or I had to get on the call and talk to well, it's not the Mormon Church had a library, and they have, were copying and storing all of the genealogy records from the archives in D.C. So to have them store it, that was like I didn't have to go to D.C. to go to the archives, even though I have been there. You can go now to the libraries in Salt Lake City or wherever, and or you can get it online. So it's so much simpler than when I started. It was really time consuming, and then traveling from California to Virginia or Pennsylvania, DC. It was a lot of time. So that's what I want to say to people. You have it easier now than I did back then. And plus you have, especially those who are from certain regions, like myself, since my ancestors were from that era, the 13 original colonies, those people that were coming in, they were the ones keeping records. They were the ones that were keeping records on the indigenous people they saw there, what they looked like. They were the ones who were telling them that they had to become Christians, and they were the ones giving them their names. So there's, so a lot of my, my people who were indigenous or native people, the names that they have was, given to them by the Episcopalian Church, the Anglican Church, the ones out here, like in California, they have like Spanish names because that's who was out here in California. So my ancestors were getting the last names of my ancestors who were indigenous, who were not enslaved, were getting the last names of the churches that they were getting Christianed in. And the law said they had to be Christian, or either they were going to be, sent to reservation. Well, they sent them to reservations anyway, even though many were Christian and took on the last Europeans' last names and stuff. So we have, some of my ancestors are Baxters, they're Bonapartes, they're Lewises, they're PINNs, the Pins. Some of my ancestors are Martins. They were taking on the name of these Europeans who were here, and the laws were stating that they had to be Christian or they had to leave. And even after they got Christian, they were still forced to leave. So a lot of my indigenous ancestors, or people from the tribes that we were connected to, they even though they were trying to comply with these colonial people were saying, or the laws these colonial people were passing, they were still sent on the trail of tears, you know? And so this, for people to say, well, why weren't you on the reservation? Or why weren't you out there? Everybody didn't go to the reservation. Some people, like in my ancestral lines, some of them went up to Canada to the Onondaga reservation. And then when they returned, they were racially designated as mulatto. They could not return and be on that census as Indian, because if you were going to be sent to a reservation. And so they were very careful about how they racially identified in public. But we knew they were passing the information down in private, and they were telling us who they were, how long they had been on that land. They told us, they, meaning my mother, because it had been passed down to her, was told us about her ancestors. And that I met other people in my community who were related or whose ancestors went through that same process of around the time of the Revolutionary War, the Mohawks or the Iroquois Confederation sided with the British. And after the British lost, the Mohawks were ran off of their land and their territory into Canada, and they went to the Onondaga reservation in Canada. And so I found relatives and connections on the Onondaga reservation in Canada, and they were, when things kind of cooled down, they started drifting back into what is now America or the United States. And when they were drifting back, they were identified as mulatto, colored, and they allowed themselves to be identified as that, because otherwise you would be sent to Oklahoma or another North Dakota, somewhere where out west to a reservation, you know. And that was just the reality that they were living under. So I wanted to make that clear, because you know, people, and then there's people who say, well, you know, they look at you, what color you are. What does that have to do with anything? Because a lot of the natives on my side of the family have a mixture of white in them. That was almost a requirement, especially the women, if they wanted to live in peace and not be thrown into work camps or thrown on a reservation. When the Europeans first came here, it was mostly men, and they were mating with the women. They were fighting the men, the native men, and mating with the native women. They didn't bring no women with them. Think about it, okay? So we have to think about that when we're talking. You know, what did they look like? I have ancestors who were Susquehanna. They were described by John Smith as being tall, with loud, resounding voices, with broad noses, bulbous. They called them bulbous noses, like the Moors. That's why I wrote a book called Black Minqua, That is how John Smith described these Susquehanna Indians, how tall they were. Their legs were like a tree trunk. I mean, he must have been a little short dude, because he sure was talking about them people being tall and being dark skinned and having broad noses, like bulbous noses like the Moors. And then he was saying some of them are born light and they turn dark when they get older. This is John Smith. It's not me talking about what they look like. And then I come to find out that one of my paternal grandfathers, my paternal grandfather, his people, his father's father on back came from Colombia, South America, and was indigenous to Colombia, South America. And they were slaves in South Carolina. So did they come up on their own? Or were they brought up as slaves? Some people in the family are saying, well, they were Seneca. They were Seminoles, excuse me, not Seneca. They were Seminole. And, the Seminoles were tall and thin. And, like my grandfather, he was tall and thin and he was brown skinned. So maybe they brought themselves up and then they were captured and enslaved. And so that's one of the stories that I'm hearing. And then I see on one of my DNA charts that we are Caribbean, that our ancestors were Caribbean Indians. So we have that in our DNA. And, it just keeps getting more and more interesting. And so I want to keep the conversation going. I'm so pleased that people are joining my channel, Anita Talks History and Genealogy. Check out my merchandise. Please check out my merchandise. This is how we keep the channel going. You can also purchase my books. I have 7 books. All of them are available through Amazon.com. Or if you donate $50 and you let me know. If you donate $50, then I will send you a signed copy of any of the 7 books that you want, except for A Nation of Flawed Just Us in the Homeland, because that's not really a genealogy book. But yeah, so you can do that, or you can donate to Cash App, $WILLS 920. You can also subscribe to my channel and keep us going, keep the channel going, keep the conversations going. History is not a mystery. I know there's a lot going on, but what's going on has always been going on in this country. It's been going on for us for 400 years at least. It's been going on, except this one here, DJT, he just brought it to the top. He brought it, he's so unable to sustain himself to do it undercover that we see what's going on. But there was others that were doing exactly what he's doing, but it was more undercover. And we were seeing world leaders getting assassinated. We were seeing drones killing civilians. It was always like this. But this one here, DJT, has brought this to the top. It's boiling over. And now we are seeing it in real time. And we are going to let it do what it's got to do. They don't need us, because this circus been going on. It's not new. We're good. And I'm gonna check with you all later. Take care of yourselves. And we're good. And I'll see you soon. Take care.